The small western town of Willow Creek was known for its quiet days and peaceful nights. People lived simple lives, working in fields, caring for animals, and sharing stories on wooden porches when the sun went down. Nothing unusual ever happened there. That was why, on one warm morning, the whole town froze in confusion when a strange shadow appeared on the dusty road leading from the hills. At first, the townspeople thought it might be a wagon or a group of travelers. But as the shape moved closer, they realized it was not a wagon at all. It was a person, yet not like any person they had ever seen. She was far taller than any man in town. Her steps slow but steady. Her shoulders slightly bent as if she was exhausted from a long journey. Her clothes were worn, and her hair fell loosely down her back. She looked like a gentle giant who had wandered out of a forgotten world. Everyone stopped what they were doing. Farmers left their plows in the fields. Shopkeepers peeked out of their doorways. Children hid behind their parents. No one dared step closer. They had never seen such a tall woman before, and fear rose in their hearts before they even knew why. The woman did not speak as she entered the town. She simply looked around with tired eyes, as though searching for something, maybe help, maybe water, maybe a friendly face. Her eyes were soft, not threatening, yet the townspeople could not see that. They were too afraid of the unknown. Whispers spread like wind through the streets. Who is she? Where did she come from? Is she dangerous? Many people did not even wait for answers. They hurried indoors, shutting windows, as if that could protect them from someone who appeared so different. The sheriff, a strict man named Briggs, stepped forward with several deputies behind him. He wasn't unkind, but he was firm and believed it was his job to keep the town safe. Even he seemed unsure as he stared at the tall woman. She towered above him, yet she made no attempt to approach him or the others. She simply stood there, breathing heavily, as if she had walked a long distance under the sun. "What do you want here?" Sheriff Briggs called out, though the fear in his voice was clear. The woman opened her mouth as if to answer, but her voice came out weak and cracked. She tried again, but only a faint sound came out. It was obvious she was thirsty, exhausted, and overwhelmed. But the sheriff interpreted her silence as something else, something suspicious. People stepped back even more. One of the deputies pointed at the simple silver ring on the woman's finger. "Look," he whispered loudly. "She's married." Another whispered, "Maybe she lost her husband." And then someone else murmured, "Maybe that's why she's wandering. A widow. A giant widow. 17. Widow. 17. Widow. She's married. A widow." And just like that, the name stuck. Within minutes, people were referring to her as the giant widow, even though none of them knew her story or what she had gone through. The woman took a step forward, but the townspeople panicked. They feared she might harm someone, even though she showed no sign of wanting to. Sheriff Briggs raised his hand and ordered everyone to stay calm, though he himself was unsure of what to do. After a moment of hesitation, he decided the safest thing, in his opinion, was to keep her away until they understood more about her. He spoke to her carefully. "Ma'am, we're going to ask you to come with us. It's just for safety. Stay calm, and we won't have any trouble." The woman nodded slowly. She didn't want to cause fear. She didn't want to be misunderstood. So she agreed, following the sheriff and deputies toward an old wooden barn on the edge of town. They had used it before to store supplies, but now they thought it would be the safest place to keep her temporarily. The woman entered quietly, still not saying much, only looking around with tired, gentle eyes. The deputies closed the big barn door behind her, not locking it harshly, but making sure she stayed inside. A few guards remained nearby to keep watch. The woman sat down in a corner, her back against the wooden wall, her legs folded carefully so they would fit in the small space. She looked out through the gaps between the wooden planks, watching the sunlight through them. She didn't look angry. She looked lonely. As news spread across Willow Creek, people gathered near the barn, whispering and guessing who she might be. Some thought she had come from far away, Some thought she might be running from something. Others believed she must have special strength because of her size. But no one considered that she might simply be a tired traveler who needed kindness. However, there was one person who saw her differently. A quiet cowboy named Elias Ford stood near the back of the crowd, watching her with thoughtful eyes. Elias was known for being calm and patient. He wasn't the type to judge quickly. When he looked at the woman through the barn's gaps, he noticed something no one else seemed to care about: her sadness. Elias didn't feel afraid like the others. Instead, he felt sympathy. He had seen animals and people alike who were misunderstood just because they looked unusual or acted strangely. Something inside him told him that this woman was not a danger. She was simply lost. While the townspeople continued to talk loudly about what to do with her, Elias quietly walked away and returned with a bucket of clean water. He approached the barn slowly, not wanting to frighten her. When she saw him, her eyes softened. He placed the bucket inside through a small side door and stepped back to give her space. She reached for it with careful hands, as if she appreciated the respect he offered. Elias watched her for a moment. She took small sips of water, showing clear signs of exhaustion. He noticed how her fingers trembled slightly, not from strength but from weakness. He saw the way she looked at the ring on her finger, touching it gently, almost protectively. That simple gesture told him she carried a heavy story inside her heart. He didn't speak much, but he nodded at her, offering a soft smile. She looked back at him, and for the first time since arriving, a tiny spark of relief appeared on her face. It was enough to confirm one thing for Elias. She was not someone to fear. She was someone who needed help. Meanwhile, the rest of the town remained uneasy. People peeked at the barn from a distance but refused to go closer. Children whispered stories about the captured giant widow, imagining things that were not true. Adults repeated rumors they had created themselves. Fear grew stronger than facts. The sheriff planned to keep her in the barn until they decided what to do. No one dared approach her except Elias, who continued to bring her water and simple food, always with gentle actions and calm words. He never made her feel trapped. He wanted her to feel understood. Even if just a little, the woman remained quiet most of the time, watching the sky through the small openings and wondering what fate awaited her. Yet every time Elias came near, she sat up straight and tried to appear calm. She sensed he was different from the others. He didn't look at her with fear, only curiosity and kindness. As the first day ended and the sky turned orange, Willow Creek felt entirely changed. The presence of the mysterious giant woman had shaken the town, filling it with confusion and questions. But hidden in that confusion was the beginning of a new connection, something no one expected. And while the townspeople continued fearing her, one cowboy had already seen what they had missed. She wasn't a giant to be captured. She was a woman with a quiet heart and a painful past, waiting for someone to understand her story. Elias Ford had always been different from the other cowboys in Willow Creek. While most people judged quickly and acted on fear, Elias believed in looking deeper before making decisions. He had grown up around animals that often acted out of confusion rather than danger, and he had learned that understanding was more powerful than fear. That same calm wisdom guided him as he watched the giant woman sitting quietly inside the barn. Every morning, the sun rose early over the hills, casting warm colors across the dusty roads. And every morning, Elias found himself walking toward the barn before doing anything else. He brought a bucket of fresh water and simple food like bread or fruits. He always placed them gently near the small side door so she wouldn't feel pressured. Each day, she accepted the food with a polite nod, her eyes speaking gratitude she rarely voiced. The rest of the town continued to stay far away. Some stood at a distance just to stare. Others warned their children not to go near the barn. A few even suggested keeping her locked up for good, but none of them saw what Elias saw. When he looked at her eyes, softness, sadness, and a deep loneliness that couldn't be explained by her size alone. One morning, after giving her water, Elias stayed near the barn, instead of walking away immediately. Through the gap between the wooden planks, He saw her hands trembling slightly as she held the bucket. He noticed the careful way she placed everything on the ground. Almost as if she feared breaking something, she was gentle, far more gentle than people had assumed. He cleared his throat softly, not wanting to frighten her. "My name is Elias," he said in a calm tone. "I don't know if you can understand me well, but I figured you should at least know who's bringing you food." The woman looked up, her eyes widening a little. She set the bucket aside and moved closer to the small opening, though she stayed seated. Her voice came out weak at first, but she spoke clearly enough. "Morena," she said with effort. "My name is Morena." Elias nodded, repeating her name slowly so she would know he heard her correctly. "Morena," he said. "It's a nice name." Morena lowered her gaze, almost shyly, but the corners of her mouth lifted just slightly. It was the first time he had seen even the smallest hint of a smile from her. Elias continued, keeping his voice soft. "People in town don't understand you," he admitted honestly. "They got scared because they've never seen someone like you before, but I don't think you mean harm." Morena shook her head quickly. "No. No harm," she whispered. She touched the ring on her finger, twisting it as if it gave her comfort. Then, she looked back at Elias. "I lost my home. Storm destroyed it. I came looking for help. I didn't want to frighten anyone." Her words came slowly, as if speaking brought back memories she didn't want to relive. Elias listened closely, nodding to show he cared. He didn't interrupt her, he simply waited patiently, giving her time to explain her truth. Morena took a deep breath before speaking again. "My husband, he is gone. Long ago." She paused, her eyes growing sad. "People were afraid of me even when he was alive. After he passed, it became worse. I lived alone in the hills. But when the storm came, I had nowhere to go. So I walked, hoping someone would help." Elias felt a heavy pressure in his chest. Not out of sorrow alone, but out of admiration. She had survived so much, yet she still walked into town with hope instead of anger. "You've been through a lot," he said softly. "More than most people can imagine." Morena nodded once. She looked down at her hands, her expression thoughtful. "I did not expect to be locked here," she admitted, her voice full of quiet honesty. "But I understand. I am different. People fear what they do not know." Her ability to accept the situation without bitterness surprised Elias. Most people would have grown angry or broken under such treatment. But Morena stayed patient, as if she had faced misunderstanding all her life and learned to live with it. Elias leaned against the wooden wall of the barn, choosing his next words carefully. "I don't think the sheriff meant to be cruel," he said. "He just didn't know what else to do. But I can try talking to him. Maybe I can explain things better." 20. Morena's eyes lifted again, filled with a fragile hope. "You would do that?" "Of course," Elias replied. "It's the least I can do. No one should be judged without hearing their story." Elias, for a long moment, Morena simply studied him through the gap in the wall. She seemed surprised by his kindness, almost confused by it. People rarely offered her understanding. Many avoided her or whispered behind her back when they crossed paths in the hills. Elias was the first person in a long time who looked at her like she was a human being and not something to fear. The day passed slowly, and Elias returned to his daily work on the ranch. But his thoughts stayed with Morena. As he rode his horse across the fields, he kept imagining her sitting alone in that dim barn, surrounded by whispers from people who didn't know her. It bothered him deeply. He knew she deserved better. Later that afternoon, he decided to approach the sheriff. He found Briggs near the town hall, talking with some men about what to do next. Elias waited until their conversation ended and then walked up to him. "Sheriff," Elias said respectfully, "I've been talking to the woman in the barn. Her name is Morena. She's not dangerous. She's just tired and alone." Sheriff Briggs raised an eyebrow. "You've been talking to her?" "Elias, you're braver than most. I'll give you that." But you can't be sure she's harmless. Elias crossed his arms calmly. I'm sure. She told me her home was destroyed in the storm. She came here because she hoped someone would help her. She didn't mean to scare anyone. The sheriff sighed, rubbing his forehead. Maybe so. But the people don't feel safe. They want something done. They think she's too big for us to handle if anything goes wrong. Elias kept his patience. Sometimes people fear what they don't understand. But we don't have to treat her like she's going to harm us. Give me some time. Let me talk to her more. She trusts me. Maybe I can find a better solution. Sheriff Briggs looked thoughtful but unconvinced. Elias, I know you've got a good heart. But the town expects me to act. We can't just leave her there forever. I'm not asking for forever, Elias replied. Just let me help her. She needs someone to listen. Briggs didn't answer right away. He stared off toward the barn, and Elias could tell he was thinking. Finally, the sheriff nodded slowly. Fine, I'll give you a little time. But if anything seems wrong, we'll have to act quickly. Elias nodded. I understand. Meanwhile, Marina sat inside the barn, waiting quietly. She didn't know what would happen next, but she held on to the small warmth she felt after speaking with Elias. For the first time since arriving, she didn't feel completely alone. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and the sky turned a soft golden color, Elias returned to the barn once again. He brought her warm food this time, along with a blanket. When he passed the blanket to her through the door, she looked at it as if it were something precious. Thank you, she whispered. You're welcome, Elias said softly. He stayed there a while, speaking to her gently about the town, the weather, and even small things like the horses he cared for. Marina listened intently, her eyes brightening a little with each passing moment. She didn't say much, but she didn't need to. Elias understood her silence as part of her gentle nature. By the time the moon rose, Elias realized something important. He trusted her completely now, and more than that, he believed she deserved a chance to live freely. Not as a frightening mystery, but as a human being with a heart and a story of her own. He didn't know how he would convince the town yet, but he knew one thing for sure: he wouldn't stop trying. The days that followed were filled with quiet tension in Willow Creek. The barn at the edge of town had become the center of everyone's attention. People walked by slowly, whispering to each other, trying to peek through the cracks in the wooden walls to see the tall woman sitting inside. Rumors grew louder each day, though none of them were true. Some said she could lift a wagon with one hand. Others claimed she had strange powers. A few even insisted she had come from a faraway place no map could show. But while the town's fear grew, Elias grew more certain that Marina was nothing like what people imagined. Every morning, he brought her water. Every afternoon, he brought her food. And every evening, he sat by the small opening in the barn and talked to her. Sometimes she answered. Sometimes she just listened with soft, thoughtful eyes. But each day, a little more trust formed between them. One morning, Elias brought her a small wooden stool, so she wouldn't have to sit on the cold floor. Marina accepted it with gentle hands, almost like she feared breaking it. She sat down carefully and sighed, as if the simple comfort felt like a luxury after days of sitting on rough boards. Elias smiled when he saw her relax. You don't deserve to be locked in a barn, he said softly. I'm sorry this happened to you. Marina shook her head slowly. Do not be sorry. You are kind. People do not know me. They fear me. She touched the ring on her finger and looked toward the door with a faraway expression. I am used to being alone, but I hoped this time it might be different. Elias leaned forward a little, making sure she could hear him clearly. It can be different, he said with steady confidence, but people need to hear your story. If they knew who you really are, they might stop being afraid. Marina's expression softened, but she still looked uncertain. Would they listen? She asked quietly. People do not listen to those who look unusual. Elias paused, knowing she wasn't wrong. He had seen how quickly people judged her, based on nothing more than her height. But he also knew something else. Fear could be replaced by understanding, if someone brave enough guided the change. Maybe not all at once, he admitted honestly. But if they heard the truth from you, if they saw the real you, they might learn. Marina gave a small, doubtful smile. You believe that? I do, Elias replied, because I've seen it with my own eyes. Her eyes warmed at his words. You see me? She said softly, repeating something she had told him before. Not many people do that. Their quiet conversation was interrupted by distant voices. A group of townspeople had approached the barn again, though they stayed far back, not daring to come close. Elias glanced behind him, then turned back to Marina. The town council wants to make a decision, he whispered. Some people think you should be moved somewhere far away. Marina's face fell. Moved? She repeated, her tone sad. Why? I did nothing wrong. You didn't, Elias said quickly. But fear makes people forget kindness. I'm trying to speak for you, but I'm only one voice. Marina closed her eyes for a moment, letting out a long, steady breath. What will happen to me? She asked. Elias hesitated. He didn't want to worry her more, but he also knew she deserved honesty. I'm not sure, he said, but I'm going to try something. I want to tell them your story. The truth. Not rumors. Not fear. I'll explain everything you told me about your home, your husband, the storm, all of it. Marina looked at him with deep gratitude. Thank you, she whispered. No one has ever spoken for me before. Later that day, Elias walked into the town hall, where the sheriff and several townspeople had gathered to discuss Marina's future. The room buzzed with tension. Some people looked frustrated, others looked scared. Almost everyone had an opinion. Sheriff Briggs cleared his throat. All right, folks, he said. We need to decide what we're doing about the woman in the barn. We can't keep her there forever. One man raised his hand quickly. We should send her away, he said. Far away. We don't know what she's capable of. Another woman added, she's too big for us to handle. It's better not to take risks. Elias stepped forward before the fear could grow louder. You're taking this the wrong way, he said, keeping his voice steady. She isn't dangerous. She's just different. And she's been through a lot. The room quieted slightly, though some people still frowned. Elias continued. Her name is Marina. Her home was destroyed in the storm last month. You all know how hard that storm hit the hills. She came here hoping someone would help her. That's all. A few people shifted uncomfortably. They clearly hadn't considered that possibility. She lived alone after her husband passed away. Elias went on gently. She didn't come here to scare anyone. She came because she had nowhere else to go. A man in the back called out, but why didn't she speak up? Why didn't she explain herself right away? Elias met his eyes calmly. Because she was exhausted, thirsty, and overwhelmed, and because everyone was staring at her like she was something dangerous. How would any of you feel if you walked into a town and everyone stepped back in fear? The room grew quiet. Even Sheriff Briggs looked thoughtful. Elias continued, Marina doesn't want trouble. She just wants safety. She's gentle, patient, and respectful. I've spoken to her every day. If she were dangerous, I would know. One woman raised her hand. Are you saying we judged her too quickly? Elias nodded. Yes. She hasn't harmed anyone. She hasn't caused problems. She's been sitting quietly in that barn, hoping someone will give her a chance. Some people began whispering softly among themselves. The fear in their voices sounded weaker now, replaced by curiosity and guilt. Sheriff Briggs finally spoke. Elias, you're asking us to trust your word alone. That's a lot to ask. I'm not asking you to trust me blindly, Elias replied. I'm asking you to look at her with new eyes. Give her a chance to be understood. Not as a giant, not as a stranger, but as a person. For the first time since Marina arrived, the room didn't fill with fear. Instead, it filled with hesitant silence, as if people were trying to see the truth clearly for the first time. After the meeting ended, Elias walked back to the barn with slow steps, wondering how Marina would react. She was sitting in her usual spot when he arrived, her hands resting gently on her knees. When she saw him, she straightened a little, trying to read his expression. "What did they say?" she asked quietly. Elias sat down outside the barn door, leaning against the wall as he always did. "It wasn't easy," he admitted. "Some people still fear you, but others are beginning to listen. They heard your story today even if you weren't there to tell it." Marina nodded slowly. "Thank you," she said again, her voice filled with soft gratitude. "You speak for me when I cannot." "You shouldn't have to be alone in this," Elias replied. "I'm glad to help." For a moment, silence settled between them. But it wasn't a heavy silence. It was gentle, warm, and full of trust. Marina looked at Elias with quiet hope. He looked back, with determination. The town might not have understood her yet, but Elias believed they would. And he was ready to do whatever it took to show them the truth that fear had blinded them, and that kindness might set them free. Little did Marina know, this was only the beginning of Elias's efforts. He wasn't just trying to protect her, he was preparing for something bigger. Something that would change both of their lives forever. The evening after the town meeting was quiet. But it wasn't a peaceful kind of quiet. It felt like the whole town was holding its breath. People went about their usual routines, closing shops, feeding animals, sweeping porches, but every conversation ended with the same question. What will happen to the giant widow in the barn? Elias felt the pressure more than anyone. He had spoken for Marina again and again, yet he knew the town still carried doubts. Some people whispered that she should stay locked up. Others said sending her away would be safer. Their fear wasn't as loud as before, but it was still there, waiting to rise again if something unexpected happened. That night, Elias walked slowly toward the barn, with a lantern swinging gently in his hand. The sky had turned deep blue, sprinkled with stars. The moon cast a soft silver glow across the hillside, making the barn look calm and lonely at the same time. As he approached, he wondered how Marina was feeling. She must have sensed the town's uncertainty just as he did. When he reached the barn door, Marina was already awake, sitting quietly with her back straight and her hands resting in her lap. She looked tired, not from lack of sleep, but from the weight of the unknown. When she saw Elias, something in her expression softened. "You came back," she said gently. "I always will," Elias replied, placing the lantern on a small crate near the door. Its warm glow filled the space between them. "I didn't want you sitting here all night without someone to talk to." Marina gave him a small smile, faint but grateful. "Talking to you helps me forget the fear," she admitted. "What fear?" Elias asked softly. "The fear of being sent away. The fear of living alone again. The fear of never finding a place where I belong." Marina looked down at her large hands, twisting her ring slowly. "I do not want to trouble anyone. I only want a simple life." Elias leaned closer, resting his arms on his knees. "You're not trouble, Marina. You're not a danger. People just need time to understand you. But time may not be enough by itself. I think I need to do something more." Marina looked at him with curiosity. "What do you mean?" Elias hesitated. He wasn't sure how to say it. The idea he had been forming felt bold, too bold for someone as quiet as him. But he also knew it was the only way to change things completely. "They want someone responsible for you," Elias said. "Someone they trust. Someone who can show the town that you're not alone, and that you're not here to cause trouble." Marina's eyes softened even more. "You have already done so much for me. I do not want to ask for more." "You're not asking," Elias said gently. "I'm offering." Marina blinked, confused. "Offering? What?" Elias took a deep breath. This was the moment. He felt his heart beat a little faster, but his voice remained steady. I want to talk to the sheriff again tomorrow. I want to tell him something important. That I'm willing to take full responsibility for you. Your safety, your needs, everything. Marina's eyes widened in surprise. Elias, you would do that? For me? Yes, he said without hesitation. I care about you. I don't want them to send you away. And I don't want you to feel alone anymore. Marina looked down, emotional in a way she didn't know how to express. But people will not approve, she whispered. They will question you. They already do, Elias said with a soft smile. But that's never stopped me before. And if standing with you can help them see the truth, then I'll stand with you every day. Marina's breath trembled slightly as she touched the ring on her finger. I thought, no one would ever want to be by my side again, she said. After my husband passed, people avoided me. They whispered things. They said I should live far away, so others would feel safe. Elias shook his head gently. Your size doesn't define your heart, Marina. Anyone can see you're kind, gentle, and patient. That's what matters to me. Marina's eyes glistened with emotion, not sadness, but a quiet, overwhelming gratitude. You are the first person who sees me this way. They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the crickets outside the barn. The soft night breeze moved through the cracks in the wooden walls, carrying the smell of fresh grass. Elias spoke again, his voice quieter this time. Tomorrow, I'll tell the sheriff that I want to help you live freely. But it may not be enough to just take responsibility. The town needs something stronger, something that shows them I'm completely committed to you. Marina tilted her head, confused. What could be stronger than that? Elias didn't answer right away. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a woman who had endured loneliness, fear, loss, and judgment. A woman who had survived life without anger. A woman who deserved peace. He knew then that his decision wasn't just about protecting her. It was about giving her the life she deserved. I'll explain it tomorrow, he said softly. But I need you to trust me. Marina nodded slowly. I trust you already, she whispered. More than anyone. The next morning, Elias walked into town early. People greeted him with cautious eyes, knowing he had spent more time with Marina than anyone else. He made his way straight to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Briggs was sitting at his desk, reading documents. Sheriff, Elias began. I've made my decision. Briggs looked up, raising an eyebrow. About the woman? Yes, Elias replied calmly. I'm ready to take full responsibility for her. Not just for now, for as long as she needs. Briggs sat back in his chair, surprised. That's a serious promise, Elias. Are you sure you know what you're saying? I do, Elias said. I'm asking you to release her under my care. I'll make sure she has a place to stay, food to eat, and safety. I'll make sure she doesn't wander into town without warning. You can trust me. The sheriff studied him for a long moment. You really care for this woman, he said finally. Elias didn't hide the truth. Yes, I do. Briggs sighed. I need to talk to the council again. But if you're serious, this could be the solution we've been looking for. Meanwhile, Marina sat inside the barn, unaware of the conversation happening in her name. She folded the blanket Elias had given her and sat quietly, her heart filled with equal parts hope and fear. Hours later, Elias returned. When Marina saw him, she felt a rush of relief wash over her. What happened? She asked. Elias stepped closer. The sheriff is considering my proposal, he said. But there's something I haven't told him yet, something I want to tell you first. Marina's eyes filled with curiosity as she watched him. Elias took a slow breath, his heart steady but full. I don't want to just care for you because the town needs it, he said softly. I want to care for you because I want you in my life, not as a responsibility, but as someone important to me. Marina's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. Elias continued gently, his voice full of honesty. I want to ask you something, but I'll ask it tomorrow. when the town is watching. Not to make a show, but to show them that I stand with you completely. Marina's chest rose and fell slowly. She didn't fully understand what he planned, but she felt warmth spread through her heart like sunlight breaking through clouds. I will be ready, she whispered, her voice full of trust. Elias nodded softly. Tomorrow will change everything. What Marina didn't know yet was that he planned to make a promise far stronger than the town expected. A promise that would not only free her from the barn, but bind their futures together in a way no one would forget. Elias woke up before the sun that morning, long before anyone else in the town had even opened their windows. He had barely slept the night before because his mind was filled with thoughts of Marina and everything she had been through. He knew that the day ahead would change not only her life, but also his own. The air outside was cool and quiet, and the sky had a soft blue color that only appeared at dawn. Elias stood outside his small cabin and took a deep breath, telling himself that today he would not let fear control anyone's decisions, not even his own. The town was still silent when Elias walked toward the old barn where Marina had been kept. He carried no rope, no tools, no food, only his steady confidence and a quiet heart full of hope. As he walked, he repeated in his mind the words he had decided to tell her. He wanted to make sure he said them with honesty and clarity, because he knew Marina carried deep pain from her past, and he wanted his words to be something she could trust. When he reached the barn, he noticed Marina was already awake. She sat near the large wooden door, her eyes fixed on the horizon through the small open window above her. The soft morning light touched her face gently, making her look calm and thoughtful. She didn't seem afraid. Instead, she seemed like someone preparing herself for whatever the day might bring. Elias stepped closer. She heard his footsteps and turned her head slowly. Her expression softened when she recognized him. "You're early," she said in her quiet voice. "I wanted to speak with you before the town wakes up," Elias replied. Marina nodded, waiting for him to continue. She always listened carefully, as if every word mattered. Elias took a slow breath and stepped closer to her, so she could hear him clearly. "I spoke to the sheriff last night," he began, "and I told him something important, something for you." Marina's eyes widened slightly, not with fear but with curiosity. Elias could sense her hope, trying to rise, even though she tried to keep it hidden. "I told him that you should not be taken away," he said softly. "I told him that you deserve to live freely, to walk in the sunlight, to make a life of your own." Marina lowered her eyes, unsure if she should believe good news so easily. "But the town is scared of me," she whispered. "They think I am different. So they think I am dangerous." "Not everyone," Elias said with quiet strength. "Not me." She looked up again, meeting his eyes. Elias stepped forward and gently placed his hand against the wooden beam of the barn, not touching her, but close enough that she could sense his sincerity. He had never feared her height, her presence, or her silence. To him, she was simply Marina, a woman with a kind heart, who had suffered far too much in her life. "There is something else I told the sheriff," Elias continued, something that surprised him. Marina waited, her breath slow and steady. "I told him that if the town needs someone to take responsibility for your safety and well-being, then I would do it." Elias paused, letting the words settle. "I told him I would stand by you." Marina stared at him with disbelief. She had never expected anyone to speak for her, especially not in a way that offered her freedom. "Why would you do that?" she asked, her voice shaking slightly. "Why take that risk for me?" Elias smiled gently. "Because I don't see you as a risk, Marina. I see you as someone with a strong heart. Someone who has carried heavy sadness alone for too long. Someone who deserves a chance to live with dignity." She swallowed hard, and he could see her struggling to hold back the emotion rising inside her. For years, people had judged her for something she never chose: her unusual size. For years, she had lived quietly, hiding away so she wouldn't scare others. And now this cowboy stood in front of her, speaking as if she were simply another person deserving of kindness. She had almost forgotten what that felt like. Elias took another breath, feeling the weight of what he was about to say. His heart beat fast. But not with fear. With determination. If you choose, he said carefully, I want to walk this life with you, not just as someone protecting you, but as someone who cares for you deeply. He looked right into her eyes. Marina, I want to marry you. The barn seemed to fall completely silent. Even the wind outside paused as if it wanted to hear her answer. Marina stared at him, unable to speak for a moment. She touched the old ring on her finger, the one that reminded her of her late husband, and felt a familiar ache in her chest. She had believed she would spend the rest of her life alone because no one would ever accept her again, especially not someone like Elias. You don't have to answer quickly, Elias said softly, sensing her hesitation. I know this is sudden, but I want you to know that my feelings are honest. I am not saying this because I feel sorry for you. I am saying this because I see a future where you and I build a peaceful life together. Marina felt tears rise in her eyes, not from sadness but from relief. She had waited for years for someone to see her as more than her height, more than the rumors about her. Elias was offering her a life she never imagined could be hers, a life where she was wanted, valued, and loved. I don't know if I am worthy of this, she whispered, her voice trembling. I am different. People may always look at me with fear or confusion. Elias stepped closer, this time placing his hand gently over hers. Her hand was larger than his, but he held it with confidence. You are worthy, he said firmly. Everyone is different in some way. What matters is the heart. And your heart is one of the strongest I have ever seen. Marina lowered her head again, letting a warm tear slide down her cheek. She had never felt so seen in her life. If you truly want this, she whispered, then yes. I accept. At that moment, the first sunlight of the morning slipped into the barn and lit the space around them. Elias grinned with pure joy, and Marina felt a warm wave of peace move through her chest. Something inside her had shifted, something heavy had finally been set free. A little later, the sheriff and a few townspeople arrived, expecting to prepare Marina for transport, but they stopped in complete shock when they saw Elias standing beside her, holding her hand gently but confidently. The sheriff blinked, unsure if he was imagining it. You're serious? The sheriff asked quietly. I am, Elias said. Marina is not a danger, and she will not be leaving this town against her will. The townspeople murmured among themselves, confused at first. But when they saw Marina standing calmly, not threatening anyone, and Elias beside her with steady loyalty, their fear slowly began to fade. They realized they had misjudged her from the beginning. She was not a creature to fear, but a woman who had simply lived through difficult times. Over the next days, the town gradually warmed up to Marina. She helped with tasks that required strength, lifted heavy beams during construction projects, and used her height to assist with repairs no one else could reach. Slowly, people saw her gentle nature, her patience, and her willingness to help. Children smiled at her, and she smiled back. Women from the town brought her fresh bread and fabric for new clothes. Men asked her for help with building fences or loading supplies. Marina was no longer the giant widow who frightened the town. She became part of the community, a valued and respected member. Her marriage with Elias took place in a peaceful ceremony under the open sky. The town attended, and many people who once feared her now applauded and cheered. Elias stood proudly beside her, their difference in height meaning nothing to him. Marina felt gratitude wash over her like warm sunlight. She finally had what she had been searching for. A home, acceptance, and someone who chose her not because she needed help, but because he truly cared. And so, the town that once feared the giant widow learned an important lesson: the heart can reveal truth far better than fear ever could. Through kindness, courage, and understanding, they found peace with someone they once misunderstood. And Marina and Elias built a life filled with quiet joy, simple moments, and a love that grew stronger each day.